be the moderator of the session that is talking about regenerative organic agriculture. Special thanks to the Milano Green Forum. Federico Manca is hidden somewhere, but he's the responsible of everything that is happening today, in good and bad, Federico. So thank you, for allowing today. And really pleased, and thank you also our speaker today, our contributor that I'm going to, introduce now. So Simon Ferrigno, welcome. Regular contributor to Ecotextile News magazine and a freelancer, researcher and writer working with public and private about sustainable cotton since 2000. But his background, and I'm really, this is one of the information that I will be using when we start talking with him. He has been a farm laborer, including an organic farm in the early 80s, Simon, that's right, correct?
Yes, correct, yeah.
So, he's a member of RIGHT Group Steering Committee, Better Cotton Initiative Advisory, as well as the Soil Association. So someone really expert on the field. Elisabetta, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Lucy.
Elisabetta Baronio joined VF Group in 2015. She managed the VF Circular Economy Program in Europe, where she trained all the VF EMEA-based designer on circular design principles, and she led the Make Fashion Circular Partnership with Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Today, she leads Timberlands Sustainability Project in EMEA and is responsible for implementing Timberland sustainability and research strategy in the region, supporting the development of better products, building stronger communities, and creating a greener future. So something amazing, someone amazing, a really clear objective today. So interesting speaker to talk about something that at the moment seems to be one of the hottest topics, regenerative agriculture. So the session is very clear. We would like not to solve any problem because in an hour we know that the world cannot be saved, but for sure to know a little bit more thanks to the expertise, thanks to the, let's say, knowledge of our speaker would be really the objective. So I would like to start having a look at the definition by Wikipedia and the Dictionary of Regenerative Agriculture. Conservation and rehabilitation approach to food and farming systems, focusing on topsoil regeneration, increasing biodiversity, improving water cycle, enhancing ecosystem services, supporting biosequestration, increasing resilience to climate change. So climate change, that is our, key let's say objective, but also something that all the world, and I have to say that despite virus and despite all the problems, this kind of topic has been accelerated in the mind of people, and we're really happy about it. And, regenerative agriculture that is also strengthening the health and vitality of farm soils. So let's start with Simon. We know, we've just read about, your long career. You are an expert about regenerative agriculture, even when it was not a topic, but it was a normal way to handle the soil, I think, with agriculture and the farmers. When and how did you get to do regenerative agriculture? And can you share for us all what it is? And please, if you want to share your slides with our, follower, please do it. Be free. That's your stage. We cannot hear you. Can you unmute, Simon?
My apologies. Yeah, my 6-year-old was just in the office, so I muted. Yes, so I will share a little bit about regenerative. So to me, yes, it's because having been working in this area for a long time, regenerative is not necessarily something new. It's a new branding. It's a new packaging of existing topics. And I'll talk a little bit about that. You see there on where you're talking about how long cotton has been around. And almost as long as cotton has been around, there has been sustainable farming practices. So sustainability is really the history of farming. So it's mentioned in Indian Ayurvedic texts. It's written in in writings by Roman experts who say that farming is a science. It's not an art. It's a science. It's about knowing what crops to plant where, what kind of soil, to make sure that they produce the largest crops as long as possible. And until recently, that meant working with natural systems and natural knowledge. And it's that knowledge that really became sustainability and agroecological approaches, which was the starting point for most of what we now know as organic farming, as better cotton, as cotton made in Africa, or fair trade cotton. So Miguel Altieri, who was one of the farmers of that, he's a professor at the University of Berkeley in California. It's about providing the mechanisms for systems to sponsor their own soil fertility. And if you have good soil fertility, then you very likely have a lot of soil carbon to deal with. And that is what is now being called regenerative agriculture. And I'll come a little bit to why that name is being given. So the tools are the same in regenerative, in IPM, in organic and sustainable farming. It's manure, compost, water management, using little or no pesticides, making use of natural predators and natural enemies, using refuges for beneficial insects, planting trees, having crop cover. So again, as I said, regenerative bundles all of those things together. And of course, there's a big focus on soil carbon sequestration, which I'm pleased about because I've only been banging on about that for about the last 15, 20 years. It's about not mining the soil by over-exploiting it. It's about building things back into the soil year on year so that you take it back to where it should be. But yeah, one of the real starting points for the modern sort of movement, for the organic agriculture movement, was when a researcher in the British Colonial Service noticed in India that peasant crops were pest-free. And from that, he had the revelation that it's not destroying the pests that's needed, it's growing a healthy crop. That is now embedded in the Food and Agriculture Organization's definition of what integrated pest management is. It's growing a healthy crop, that's the goal. And that defines all of the standards that we now know today. And Sir Albert Howard went on to be one of the initiators of the organic movement in the UK. But regenerative agriculture, that comes about Robert Rodale of the Rodale Institute, who promotes a lot of organic farming. He said sustainability doesn't challenge us enough. And that's how he came to define regenerative agriculture, to have a bigger challenge. So for the purists, regenerative means going back to basics, rejecting what's called the conventionalization of organic farming, where you try and do the same thing as industrial agriculture without so many pesticides. But what you're still promoting then is mass consumption with all the problems that causes, industrial farming, which may also include industrial farming of animals with all the cruelties that may involve. And that's something that's very advanced, particularly in the US. But regenerative, so again, it's about soil organic matter. And this is something, if you look at agricultural soils worldwide and start testing, you realize that a soil that's left undisturbed or well maintained and one that is intensively farmed may have as little as 10% of the organic matter that it should have. And organic matter means soil carbon. Soil carbon means locking in carbon that otherwise would contribute to global warming. And if we're going to meet our targets in the next decade of keeping below 1.5 degrees global warming, we need to do this. And there's huge potential for locking carbon in soils, even in relatively poor tropical soils where most cotton is farmed. So a core goal has to be restoring soil organic matter to its natural levels. That can be done, has to be said, without a standard, if there's a will. And this is the risk with a term like regenerative. It's a nice buzzword, but it's likely and is already being claimed by everybody. And there's also, arguably, we have too many standards. And to a brand, I would always say, well, know what's in your chain and check whether the right thing's being done. And it doesn't matter really what cotton or where it's coming from, because if you know where your cotton comes from, you can go and test the soils. And actually, it's a pretty small cost. And I've done it for brands. We were able to not just measure, okay, almost
transparency and traceability of everything, but is one of the leading points you know, when you do your strategy to be sustainable, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's what the OECD promotes with the due diligence concept. It's know what's in your chain, because then you can address the most urgent problems, and one of which would be arguably climate change. So regenerative, you could say it's a back to basic approach. I spoke to Tim Marshall, who's an old hand at organic agriculture, who's just been elected chair of one of Australia's organic organizations. And he warns that regenerative can cover a broad spectrum. It's not really well defined yet. And if you're trying to build a certification program without defining what it is you're doing, you could be having some problems. So that's just a word of caution, because he points out already their National Farmers Federation in Australia is already saying that doing no-till in GM crops is regenerative because they're not disturbing the soil. And that's a single issue sort of statement, which isn't really good enough. And the same thing's already happening in the US. So that's just something to be aware of. That the term is, it's got a feel-good factor now, but it will be devalued quite rapidly unless it's well defined. So with that, I will stop speaking for now and stop screen sharing.
Well, you will not stop speaking because I have some question for you.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, okay, that's very clear that, when we go back to, when we talk about regenerative agriculture, we go back to agriculture. So it's something that is a sort of ancestor, let's say, in a very broad term, what we are talking about. But at the same time, I think the good part of today is that people want to go deep inside, and we have in the market, some companies, because let's be also quite, let's go out from the generic to go into something a little bit more specific. And we start to have examples that maybe are not perfect, Simon, because we know that, in order to be 100%, done, we need to understand better. I keep saying that there is no sustainability without knowledge, and this is not different from that. But we have people that is starting to go deep inside because we fully understood them, even if it's not something so, let's say, to be a genius to understand that the soil and what we eat as well should be protected and should be, conserved, in a certain way. But which is your, let's say, advice, maybe, for brands that are starting this, journey, because it's another journey, inside it's one of the sustainability journey as well. I fully agree with, transparency, try to get all what is behind, because without knowing where you are, how you can move, that's for sure. But, which are maybe reference point, the people, association, is there something that you can recommend for people to know a little bit more? Because as we had the first conversation together, I was really, trying to get help from you, and we will be sharing the slides of Simon if someone wants, because he has been really, nice to say, they are available. But what you will recommend to start understanding a little bit more this kind of message? Because it's not just doing agriculture, it's not just doing organic, it's a little bit more holistic approach to agriculture as well. And we will see that it's not just about cotton, it's about many other things, because you touch very quickly base about animals, and Elisabetta will take us through this next challenge. But thinking and considering that we're not about perfection, which are the first steps you recommend?
It's really learning some of the basics. So it depends where you are in the chain. If you're in a brand, I think the first thing to try and do is really understand what farming is and how it works. And for many people now, of course, that's not something you necessarily have a direct connection to. But if you can, I know in California for a long time, a cotton organization there was organizing field visits for people, take you out to the fields. I believe Timberlands have probably been on some of those, Elisabetta, but go out into the fields with a farmer and learn what farming is. On a smaller level, if you garden at home, or I imagine in Italy, just as here in the UK, a lot of people do vegetable gardening on a small scale. You can learn a lot by watching what's happening in your garden about how different things interact with each other. Different plants would attract the bees would pollinate your fruit trees and some of your crops. So that there's a lot of ways of doing it without necessarily just sitting down with a heavy tome on how to be a farmer.
No, I don't think that we can go back to basics so much.
No, but it's learning a few things. Yeah, if you can get out into the fields, that is really the best way. So visit a farm, even if it's not a cotton farm, but visit a farm and watch how it works. Talk to the farmer, learn about.
Okay, so as soon as the virus will and government will let us walk around, that will be one of the first things to do because it's really enjoyable. Thank you very much, Simon. And this, information will take us to Elisabetta Barogno. So, Elisabetta, you are fully on these, on these arguments in some time with a different, let's say, perspective, because it's not just about the cotton, and it's also about other arguments, but also, you are here talking about the timberland, but I know that the company VF has a quite a strategic approach concerning this. Can you take us through? I do not want to talk too much because I would like you to,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And probably I would like to do a step back to actually understand why for us it's so important to look at the regenerative space. Simon really well explained what is regenerative agriculture and what we, let's say, experienced throughout our journey towards sustainability as a brand. Timberland was been building the brand itself on the concept of sustainability, was that our world is actually in a degraded state. So bridging back to what Simon was saying, probably just being sustainable is not enough anymore. We need to do something more. We need to ensure not just to be less bad, we need to be more good. So starting from this idea, we really started to work on our product innovation vision at Timberland. And this September, we released our publicly this product innovation vision that will drive us towards 2030. And this vision is saying that we want to create products that have a net positive impact on the planet. This is a bold statement, we know, and what we have done in the past 2 years was actually to work behind this vision to create the true strategies that will lead us there. And the true strategy that we are working currently on are on one side the circularity, because we need to reduce the waste that we produce. We need to ensure that our product not just last longer, but they are also made to be remade and so on. But there is a second strategy that will enable us to actually play in the field of net positivity. This strategy is about regenerative agriculture. And we committed for 100% of our natural materials to come from regenerative sources by 2030. And when I say natural materials, I mean leather, which is our top spend in Timberland, cotton, rubber, we do boots, we do shoes, and this is a big one, wool and sugarcane, that is becoming one of the most important bio-based sources for us. So we will move all these products to regenerative sources, and probably one of the, let's say, biggest push that we had that was actually telling us that we were going into the right direction was actually the work that our parent company VF has been doing. So as VF Corporation, our parent company committed to science-based target back, I think 2 years ago. And science-based target, for those that are not familiar, are a roadmap, a scientific roadmap to stay within the Paris Agreement commitment. And while doing the whole analysis for the science-based target, we really calculated all the impacts of the different steps of the supply chain, upstream and downstream, other than our own and operated facility. And it came out that 50% of the total emission that we have, around more or less 50%, is due to the raw material choice. And then we start to model a little bit what could have been done to actually ensure that we reach our science-based target. And we started to work a little bit with the sustainable material that we all know. And we saw that we would have never reached our goal if we were just working with the sustainable material that we all know. And this is where regenerative agriculture came in really in a powerful way, because when we started to input the data from regenerative agriculture, we saw that our impact would have been really decreased compared to, let's say, the past. And this has been probably the strongest boost, together with a really, I would say, commitment from the brand to move towards, let's say, the next step for our sustainability strategy.
This is amazing. So the strategic approach is really, and the measurement, science-based measurement, it's not just, the passion, the emotional part, it's really important, but at the same time, if you do not start to understand where you are, who you are, where you want to go, and to measure, it's not going to happen. And I know it's not been easy. It's not easy because, I'm talking about the past, but, you are on the road, to do it.
We often call it, we are on the road to circularity, on the road to regenerative.
And both of the things, of course, are linked, but both of them are quite radical way to position. But because the needs, I think, in terms of climate challenge, you talk very clearly. If we need to reduce our, footprint at different level, the conventional into bracket, even sustainable materials sometimes is not enough. So how you are doing it, how you are taking, these, let's say, strategic approach down to the source and to consumer, because at the end, you're a brand and you need to have an offer and it needs to be done, from a certain look with a certain performance, innovation, price, all the things that we know very well. So can you take us through these experiences, even if you are at the beginning, of course,
Yeah, no, but it has been like a really collaborative experience, and also is breaking a lot of silos that our industry normally have. So we like how it's working in Timberland right now. There is a full team of people coming from different functions that are working on this roadmap that meets regularly to define what are the next steps. So we have kind of an innovation pipeline, and we have already started to fill in what are the next steps. We know where we want to go. We know what is at 2030 and what is at stake. But we really need right now to put the tactics on the ground, and we are doing it season by season. Of course, like being a fashion company and a company that works with product, we always have the season that are designed and made 2 years in advance compared when they are actually hitting the market. So it's a really important, there is a really important work right now that is happening behind the scene to ensure that all our collection, all our new products are rethought. Probably the thing that we are as well super proud of is that we are already starting to see the let's say the results of this work. So this fall winter 20 we had 4 different styles and we are selling right now on our website that are made with leather that comes from regenerative agriculture. And here the challenge were extremely big, also because at the time we have been really one of the first players that was working in this direction. Right now it's becoming kind of a buzzword. When we started to work on that, it was 3 years ago, even a little bit earlier. And it was not such a thing in the market, probably like just few people had heard about regenerative agriculture, and we really had to recreate the supply chain for these products, we had to go to the farmers, and here Simon is right. Once you see the process itself, when you see with your eyes, everything makes sense. And we went to the farmers. We had to connect the farmers that were using regenerative practices with our suppliers that were tanning the process and were processing the leather and the hides. So we really had to build something that was not existing. It also implied a lot of work on our side, but it created this kind of transparency that you were mentioning. We now have full transparency and the full chain of custody for these products. In the leather industry that we know is quite challenging when it comes to traceability and transparency. And we're now expanding to cotton, to sugarcane, and to rubber, because these are all in the pipeline. And in fall winter 21, we will have the first product. So in 1 year from now, that will be made with cotton, organic cotton that comes from regenerative farming. And over here as well, the great work that we have been doing, not just ourselves, but also with our partners, is also not just to buy the product, but it's also to fund those farmers that are transitioning to regenerative organic farming practices. So in India, for instance, we really founded 250 farmers. And in this way, we are building the supply chain, but also the real supply of materials that right now is not there. It's not simply there.
You know, I'm really, really pleased and surprised at the same time, because, you know, and I'm not surprised so often because, as you know, things, you know, sometimes they look bigger, right, Simon, because the words can help. But when I think back, you started from the most difficult thing. You didn't start with a t-shirt, you start with boots, right?
Yes, we started with boots. Commercially, yeah, and the leather is coming from Thousand Hill. That is a supplier that is a farmer in the US that uses all these regenerative practices, and we created the supply through a partner that is called the Other Half Processing, and it is real. It can be done. Like, I think that one of the most powerful thing is that it is something that can be done. It takes a lot of work, but it's possible. And we are kind of making it as a testament as well for the industry that this is the direction to go. And yeah, so this is it was indeed a huge challenge. And also the people that were working on the booth, for instance, that were product developers that have been working on it for several years. They said once we entered the regenerative space, we got to know a completely different type of supply chain that we were not aware of. It was a learning process, a big learning process also for us. And now what we are doing is scale this impact from just a couple of, let's say, a couple of products for women and men to actually enlarge our offer to more and more products.
So it's an open source at this point for all the brands of the group.
Let's say that we sparked the competition, and we would like others, of course, like we have our highs that are secured for us, of course, but it's something that we really would like others to embark on. We can really make a change just if all the brands are moving towards this direction. It's not just Timberland that is going to change the situation in which our world is in. It's the overall, I would say, the overall fashion industry that can create a change.
But, you know, to make the start with the VF Corporation Group, with the Timberland, that, you know, it's not a niche, it's something more, and it's really, I think it's helping. And I would like to go to the last question from myself before opening, because I've seen that there are quite a lot of questions that are coming from the audience as well. Now you have done this, you know, new model, new supply chain. How how are you going to tell to the consumer that what they are coming from a completely different chain? Because we have already talked, Elisabetta, sometime was in the past about how to communicate sustainability, because we have already responsible innovation, you know, but sometimes what is missing is to align the story making with the storytelling. We have a lot of storytelling and sometimes there is no story making, so it's just greenwashing. This case is so important. How, you know, I know it's another challenge in the challenge.
It is indeed. It was at first, the real challenge was to explain internally what regenerative agriculture was about, to create excitement about that. Right now, what we are doing is like we have a platform of products that we call Earth Keepers. Those Earth Keepers Plus products are the pinnacle innovation when it comes to sustainability. So our regenerative stories are within this big platform of products that are our, let's say, our front runner when it comes to sustainability. We are telling the story and we are collaborating as well with the industry to tell the story. So there is a fantastic documentary on Netflix that is available for everybody that is called Kiss the Ground. And let's say that while we wait to go and see the farming practices, is a good way to actually see how regenerative agriculture is implemented and what are the benefits. So we are really trying to work as well with NGOs, with other organizations to tell this story, because I'm completely convinced that as soon as the consumer will get to know the power of regenerative agriculture, the sooner they will get in love with that and they will start asking to brands to go in that direction. As of now, they don't know why it's so important to move towards regenerative. And of course, like we will do our part, but it's also like we are trying to involve as many players as possible. Because in this way we can create education and awareness.
So at the moment, the consumer needs to buy Earth Keepers line of materials.
But there is like let's say we have a full page on the website that talks about regenerative agriculture. There is an end tag that explains the thing. So there is also on our social media, if you go, like there are stories on Instagram, on like different posts that tell the story of regenerative agriculture in a really simple way.
We will have a look.
Yeah.
And I think it will be great at the end of the year, maybe to regroup and to understand the savings, you know, because you said that we did it in order to meet our targets in terms of reducing, you know, the impact. It will be great also to have a look. As time is running, I would like to stay here forever because it's really a very interesting, you know, subject. I need to open up the questions from the audience. So the first one is quite easy because, you know, they are saying, will this session be available to watch at a later date? Yes. And the Federico Manca, organizer, you know, will give us exactly where to find. I think it's going to be on YouTube, but, you know, I will let then the organizer to give us the kind of details. And then we have Tony Tobiasson. Hi, Tony, first of all. Nice to have you here. And they say, how about looking at fiber shed?
Yep.
I think it's a sort of recommendation.
Indeed, like one of our, let's say, sister company, the North Face, is working with them for they're working with regenerative wool. So indeed, they have also a powerful story to tell to the consumer.
Great. And then we have are bodies such as Caring Group and Higgins, even the EU environmental product footprint, even accepting these in their tools?
So, Simon, do you want to take it or shall I take it?
Oh, you can go ahead, Elizabeth.
So the Caring Group is working right now with the Savory Institute as we are doing, and they are, and this is something that it's a really an industry-wide I would say, effort. It goes really beyond the brand. So from an index perspective, we will need to see what the product module will look like. As it's not been released yet, but indeed, regenerative agriculture is becoming right now really a reference point in the textile industry, at least for what I'm seeing. I've been contacted by many other brands to actually know better what we are doing, and we are sharing with let's say our peers and competitors our journey. And the more like, let's say, there will be knowledge, the more this type of regenerative agriculture will be probably adopted and included into the standards.
Very clear. Another question, Nick Pacini. Would you not say that regenerative agriculture must rely on agroforestry strategies? Can we really be regenerative without the help of trees?
Happy to take that one, maybe.
Please.
I would say, well, it's not always possible to plant as many trees as we'd like and still leave room for the crops. But in general terms, trees are really important for several reasons in regenerative, in any sustainable farming, not just regenerative. They act as barriers, they act as refuges, they act as taproots to help preserve the water in the soil. They prevent soil erosion. They provide somewhere for animals to pass through. They give shade to water in very hot climates to preserve ponds and other things. So if you take some of the sustainable farming in northern Peru, in essentially what is a desert, it's made possible because of trees. Farmers in Zambia that I've worked with also use trees to shape their ponds to ensure they have water in the dry season. And another project in Malawi, one of the things we recommended as people who are moving into more water harvesting, plant trees to protect that water so that you extend your growing season, but you also preserve a natural resource that's quite vital. So absolutely, there's been some interesting experiments as well with cotton and coffee in Zambia, which is not something you'd normally think of as a crop association in cotton farming, but it works very, very well. Cotton needs the heat, coffee needs the shade, but together you can do some interesting things with that. So there's a lot of things you can do. Can't always necessarily, particularly one of the things that holds back, particularly on larger scale farms having more trees, is that all our machinery is still geared for large farms. The interesting thing for me in future with robotics development is, does that allow us to go back to smaller scale farming, a much nicer landscape at the same time? Because if you're not going to be paying somebody to drive your huge machinery, why not have smaller machines doing the work and plant more trees in between your fields? So I think how we reimagine the future is going to be interesting there.
New scenarios, new scenarios.
And possibly better landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question. There is a lot of money and power at stake in the agricultural sector when it comes to conventional systems. And they are fighting back with carbon agro, for example. They have too much to lose if regenerative farming wins. Any thought on this? Simon, I think.
Yeah, well, somebody who's been pushing sustainable agriculture for a very long time, yes, it's a never-ending fight. I just had received something in my email before this from DSMOG, who are looking at the something similar, and also I saw there's something brewing because CropLife are trying to work with the FAO more directly, and we have to lock some of these practices into legislation, and a lot of that is going to depend on what happens at the level of the European Union, where there's a vastly different approach to defining sustainability, but also what is safe from, say, the United States, which is the other big player there. That means taking a precautionary approach, in the first instance, but it also means looking at what legislation will promote more sustainable and regenerative agriculture, and how you make corporations responsible for the impacts of their actions. And I think that's critical. So if you look at the law on the duty of corporate vigilance in France, it already starts to make brands responsible for not taking the right action after they've performed due diligence. If that does, as has been mooted, get adopted as at the European Union level, and if it's not watered down, so there's a lot of lobbying to be done to make sure those laws are strengthened, not weakened, then you have the tools to make brands responsible, and hopefully then you push them to moving carbon agro much more towards being regenerative. I think we have a bit of an open window with institutions like the International Cotton Advisory Committee, who in the time I've been working in cotton, 20 years now, have come a long, long way towards becoming more activist, even I would say, around climate change, but also have some real experts heading the technical section. So they know about cotton, they know about cotton farming, and they know about the problems because they've lived them.
Absolutely. Sorry, we have four more questions, more related, to the real product as well. Can you please recommend, Svetlana, can you please recommend farm suppliers who practice regenerative cotton farming?
So more for me, I think. So there is Indigoag that you can have a look. It's regenerative cotton, not regenerative organic cotton, but it's it seems like they are growing quite fast. We have some suppliers in India, so maybe you can look in India, where there is a lot of organic cotton, and of course, right now, this is a little bit competitive advantage yet. But what we are doing at Timberland as well is also to tap into the work that we are doing in Haiti to bring cotton into the community, and we are transitioning this cotton to regenerative. So it's not just about what the suppliers are doing right now, it's also about finding new creative ways to ensure that we have a new stock. There are just a bunch of suppliers right now that are producing regenerative cotton.
The two more questions from Maria Cristina Favarini, Sportswear International. How much more expensive can be products done with materials obtained from regenerative agriculture, for example, Timberland boots? And in terms of durability and protection, are we at the same level of regular leather?
So the leather is the same. The leather, regenerative agriculture doesn't impact the quality of the leather, because the animal is just the way in which the animal is grown and where the animal is actually, how the animal is fed, all these kind of things. It's not about the leather per se. So durability and all these kind of things are exactly the same, because the leather is exactly the same. The heights are exactly the same. In terms of price, of course, there is a premium right now that comes with a regenerative. This is because we had to build everything, as I was saying, from scratch, was not existing. And of course, this creates more cost. But we are convinced that the more we will have also other brands to work into this direction, the higher will be the ability that actually this premium will go to, will lower, and we will have a, let's say, the normal price for leather.
Can you say maybe an indication?
So right now, I mean, you can also look on the website in case, but we are talking about kind of for the boots, if I'm thinking to the different boots, around 10 euros of premium.
Someone was also
if you think about Giusy, the great things that come with regenerative, it's nothing.
But that's why it's important. I keep saying for any kind of values, that you need to explain people the values that you are offering, because people will never invest something more if there is nothing more that you are offering them. And you have to be clear with your offer. So fully agree. Someone is also asking if you can repeat the name of the documentary of Netflix about regenerative agriculture.
I saw that Simon replied as Kiss the Ground.
Kiss the Ground. Okay.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Charles Ross, Simon, but also Elisabetta. I like the comments of how regenerative agriculture will become the greenwashing phrase. Perfect comments you made on there and how to protect against it. That I think is the most important thing, because we want to stay for the good and not to discuss about how bad it is. So please.
Well, maybe I can start and then Elisabetta can conclude on that. And I think it's such simply define it. So government legislation at some point has to come out and say regenerative means this. And then always remember, campaigners, keep an eye on what brands are doing and remind them if they forget the basics or if they're making claims that can't be substantiated. And the other thing, and this is what we need for everything we do, it's data. So how much carbon have you locked in the soil? And how much was there and how much should there be? Then you know whether it's regenerative or not.
Yeah, indeed, I agree. Like also for us that we are probably first movers in the area, it's really important that this concept doesn't get diluted. It's a groundbreaking thing in the industry, can solve a lot of issues. And it's the most powerful tool we have right now for climate drawdown and to address climate change. So it's really important to get to standards that are common for all the different materials as well. Right now we have a lot of standards that are coming up. So it's really important to have consistency and to work on the data, not just on how little better you made the things, but what is, as Simon was saying, like the potential of carbon sequestration into the soil, and to ensure that from also a governmental perspective and from a protocol perspective, it's all like this is always strived for the best.
Absolutely. And I would like really to thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you to the audience that was there with really also interesting question. I think just to really wrap up that it's good that things are moving, that we have new values, really pleased with this new formula about regenerative agriculture, but we need, as everybody was saying, to measure, to substantiate, and to share these data, to share what has been done, and to communicate in a simple but effective and authentic way also to the market and to the consumer. Thanks again, Milano Green Forum. Thanks, Elisabetta. Thanks, Simon. Thanks to everybody, and have a good weekend time, I think. Grazie.